Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia Toothacre, and I am the career coach and strategist behind Ride the Tide Collective, the podcast, and the company. This is a career-focused podcast that helps ambitious professionals strategize and take action to control their career in a way that aligns with their personality and their values. This season, I am embracing the collective part of my company name, and I've invited various coaches and experts to talk about topics that impact career development and decisions. But not this episode. This is a solo episode, and I'm doing a couple of solo episodes on topics that are a little bit more sensitive and also have just a wide range of things that we can talk about. And I didn't want to pigeonhole any one expert or topic. So I'm going to be covering them a little bit more generally. And this episode is going to be about spirituality and your career. Okay. Here's the thing. Please understand that I am not going to be approaching spirituality or religion from any specific lens. Okay. This is going to be a general conversation, regardless of whether you follow the moon or Jesus or Buddha. Okay. I'm also not going to get into any theological debates with anyone, so please do not come at me for that. This is meant to be an overview and a starting point of how to view or talk about your career and spirituality or faith. Okay, we're kind of talking about that intersection if it applies to you. It will not apply to everyone. While I don't work exclusively with clients from any specific faith, I am very well versed in career perspectives within the Christian faith because of my background and some of my work contexts, but I am not going to be going into the specifics of Christianity and career. That's not what this episode is about. If you do have specific questions, you are welcome to message me or email me. So what are my qualifications to talk about this topic? So one, I have worked in both faith-based environments and non-faith-based environments. I have had conversations with people who were very firm in their faith, to those who have been struggling and they're trying to figure it out, to those who have lost their faith and they're also trying to figure out what that means for them. Because I've worked in a variety of work contexts, I've worked from people with multiple faith and spiritual backgrounds. So even though my personal background is Christianity, I have worked with people from all kinds of faith backgrounds. So I've had these conversations, and to be fair, they're all the same. They're all the same. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation very generally, because I think a lot of times we try to say, oh, it's career development for somebody who is Jewish, for somebody who is Muslim, for somebody who is Christian or Catholic or whatever it is. And yes, there are some nuances, but for the average person, there really isn't. There are some overarching things that we need to consider. And so I am going to go through some of that in this discussion. So if your faith, your spirituality is something that is important to you and you want to understand how do you intersect that with career and what can that look like, this is going to be the episode for you. If you are looking for theology around career, not going to happen. We're not doing that here. So I just want to lay those expectations from the beginning. Okay. So as a career coach, the main question that I will ask, and I will ask this of all of my clients, whether they have disclosed a faith to me or not, but I will ask, does your faith inform your career? And if it does, what way does it do that? Okay. And this is important to know because it will impact how we approach your career development. And specifically, if you're looking for a new position or you're looking to advance or something like that, you want to make sure that you're going to the right company, you're in the right position, all of that. So here's a couple of questions to consider. One, do you want to work in a faith-based organization? That's a very specific kind of organization. not saying it's good or bad. Every faith is different. Some are very open about it, some aren't. But it is something that you have to consider. Is that something that you want to do? Work for a company where faith is on the forefront of the organization. Do you want your career and work to be focused on a function that supports your religious beliefs? So for most people, it's helping others in a specific way. So I know quite a few people who went into nursing because they wanted to help people and they felt like that profession really aligned with their faith well. And so they saw it as, I'm doing this thing for my faith, but I also really love nursing and I'm helping people and all of that. It doesn't have to be that way. A lot of people go into nonprofit for that reason. It doesn't mean that you have to have a specific career where you are directly helping people if that's not your skill set. But that is something that you do want to consider. Some people want to work in their faiths, well, in Christianity, it would be like their denomination, their church, right? Whatever their religious facility is, like they want to work for that, or they want to work for an organization that supports it, or like a denomination or a sect or something like that. That's absolutely fine, but that's a specific kind of process that's very niche. And so it's good to know that because your opportunities and your situations are going to look different. Something that I don't think gets talked about enough when we're talking about spirituality and career is, do you have a faith that has different requirements for time off, fasting, different dates like holy dates and things like that? You'll likely want to work in organizations that support those practices without discrimination. Companies are getting much better about this, but not all of them are aware. And so it's something that you want to try to find out before you're applying to a position, right? So these are all things that you want to consider. One thing I will say, I have seen different lists around of companies that are friendly to certain religious practices. So if you have a specific religious practice that has different things that you need to do or that your employer needs to be aware of, I would do a quick web search and see if you can find one of those lists. I'm not going to give any recommendations because there's too many different types of religions, but that is something that I would do because they are likely cataloged somewhere online. Okay. So once you kind of figure out like what you want when your faith informs your career and you know what you want that to look like, what's the next step in that? From there, we have to figure out the deal breakers, right? So these are essentially the values that you have, the practices that you have that you are not willing to compromise on. And you won't go to a certain position or a certain company if you have to do XYZ or they're not supporting XYZ. I have a values freebie. I will link it into the blog post for this episode. That is a great place to start for general values. And it does include religion and spirituality in that. But you have to consider what your specific needs are with your faith. If you need time to pray and your company is not open to you doing that at different times during the day, got to figure that out. That's going to be a deal breaker for you. Okay. Likely these are already things that you're aware of and that you are looking for in an organization. But if somebody's new to the faith, if you are a younger professional trying to figure these things out, these are some of the things that you want to consider. Regardless of how your faith informs your career, you can connect your faith and your values to the purpose of the organization that you work for. So, you can have a position that is directly related to your faith, but you also don't have to. You can look at, the organization's purpose, the impact that they have, I think sometimes I'll talk to professionals who are in, let's say, a very analytical career path, and they don't see that connection with their faith, right? Because they're like, I crunch numbers all day. I'm looking at a screen all day. I rarely interact with people. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's more looking at what is your organization doing at the end? And so how do you support that? And do you want to be a part of that? Does it make sense? Does it have to align with your faith? And here's the thing too, like, it doesn't have to. And I think when we talk about spirituality and career, there's this idea that, like, if you are not in a career that directly impacts your faith, or you are impacting somebody else based on that, that you shouldn't be doing it. And that's not the case. At the end of the day, you work to get a paycheck to live, right? If your work happens to align with your faith, that is wonderful, but it does not have to. I have really seen clients, and back when I was in higher ed, a lot of students struggle with their skill set and their faith not aligning, right? So giving the example of that more analytical mindset, can you choose the type of, company you work for? Absolutely. You can choose a company that has a mission that connects more with you on a spiritual level, but also you don't have to. Those two things can be separate. Your religion and your faith and your spirituality does not have to directly come with you to work, right? The thing that you have to remember is you are still a representation of your faith, just you as a person, who you are, how you act, your behavior, your words, like all of that is still a reflection of your faith. So even if your specific career path, you think it's not aligned, you are the alignment, right? You are the connection to that. Okay. Perspective is so important here. Understanding where you fit with the religion and all of that. And I've been in scenarios where people have been, let's say, judged. It's probably the nicest word I can use, or shamed for their career choices by people within their religion, because they didn't feel like that career path was the right career path, for their faith. We're not doing that here. We're not doing that. It does not matter. Your job is to get money, to live, right? Pay taxes, to eat, to live. That's truly what it is. You can live out your faith outside of the work that you do as well. Okay. I've had people who feel like their career path is basically a cog in a wheel, right? So nothing's really happening. They're just kind of spinning through their career. That happens. I swear to you, that happens to everybody at some point. But what I want to say there is, again, what is the end goal? So even if you and your position is not directly impacting a client or a customer or something like that, what is the overall goal? What are you trying to do? And I think sometimes people forget that perspective, right? They forget, oh yeah, the company does XYZ and I really like it, and here's why. And even though you might not be directly related to that outcome, you are still a part of it. And I think that that's something that you have to remember when we talk about putting things into perspective. Okay. I'm going to say something, and I think some of you are going to be mad. I'm going to say it anyway. There is a certain level of privilege that can come with making certain career decisions based on your faith. I have known many people who have gone into nonprofit work because they feel called, quote unquote, to help others in that way. But if you have been in nonprofit or you have applied for nonprofit positions, the pay is terrible. Across the board, the pay is terrible because the money is essentially going back into whatever service that nonprofit is providing. So this can create a values clash or frustration if you want your work to align with your faith in that way, because you're not getting paid a livable wage in most cases. And so the reason that I say that it's a privilege to work in nonprofit is because in my experience, the people who are able to work in nonprofit are in situations that allow them to take that lower salary. Okay. So maybe they have a spouse who makes significantly more money. Potentially they're living at home. They don't have the same level of expenses. They are in a situation where maybe they're living with multiple people and they don't have as high of an expense as if they were living on their own. There are a lot of different scenarios that can happen. Obviously, not everybody fits into that, but for the most part, when I have seen people go into nonprofit work, they can do it because there's some other financial benefit somewhere else that allows them to do that work. So I just want you to think about that when you're going into nonprofit. The pay is terrible. And so you have to be at a certain point. I will also say I see nonprofit as more of an early career option because the pay is so low. So what you will see is people go into nonprofit early in their career, they burn out of it, and then they leave nonprofit, go somewhere else and get paid significantly better. That's kind of the reality of that world. And I'm not knocking nonprofit. I have known people who've been I've worked in nonprofit. I have known people to work in nonprofit and absolutely love it. But I do believe that there is a level of privilege for that. And so just recognize that depending on your situation. Having said all of that, I've spoken to many people who value a high income and struggle with wanting that for themselves and their family because their faith tells them that it's not right. So you have this clash of your faith saying, don't have money, don't have success, but depending on your situation, you want that for yourself, right? So obviously this is all a matter of perspective and interpretation, but I have had this conversation so many times with clients who have a faith background, and it does not matter what the faith is. This happens across faiths, but financial success seems to be a hot button issue for many people who are trying to have more of a spiritual inclusion into their career. Okay. I have to talk about a scenario that happened. This happened so long ago, probably over 10 years ago. I had a student and I think he was getting ready to graduate, but I had a student who really valued a high salary. And he basically said to me, I don't want to talk to you about this because I've had this conversation with other people and it's been so hard because they shame me for it. And he told me, I want a high salary and all that. And I said, okay, why is that a problem? And he said, well, because, we're not supposed to covet, quote unquote, money. And I'm like, okay, but why do you want a high salary? What is your motivation for that? Well, he grew up below the poverty level and they never had basic things, right? Like he would not have meals and just a lot of really terrible situations. And so he said, I want to make a lot of money because not only do I want to support my own family, I don't want my kids, and he didn't even have kids. I don't even think he was dating it. But he said, I don't want my kids to grow up the same way that I did. But I also want to help support my family. So his extended family. So he's like, my goal is to make as much money as possible so that my family can live a better life. And I was like, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's one of the hard things when you're talking about religion informing your career is there are so many things that are ingrained in us from things that other people have said or things that people are just saying to us that make us question our own values, that make us question what we want and why we want it. That young man had every right to want to make more money and support his family. And nobody should have told him that that was the wrong thing to do. So to me, you're telling this kid is better for you and your family to stay in poverty than to do better and be better. Because I will tell you, he likely is giving back more financially and with his time than probably most people, right? So these are the things that we have to think about. Just because your religion says, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, doesn't mean that it's the right choice for you. Okay. Sometimes you need somebody like me to go, well, but you're doing it for this reason. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. At the end of the day, your spiritual life is your life. It's not somebody else's. And you need to make decisions that work for you and your worldview, not the collective. It needs to work for you, for your family, for your immediate family, your extended family, if that's something that you even want to take into consideration. But your spirituality, your faith, your religion, whatever it is yours. All right. It does not matter what choices you make in your career or anything else, as long as you understand why you are making those choices. Okay. I know that this is a heavy topic for some people. I have probably said things that you don't agree with. I've probably upset some people. I'm kind of okay with that. If you have any questions, again, message me on LinkedIn or email me. I will put some resources into the blog post for this episode. If you have specific questions, I'm always happy to answer those if I feel like I have the right information to answer them. If I don't, I will absolutely let you know. But I hope that this was helpful and at least gave you a foundation to think about spirituality in your career and the decisions that you're making.